Okay, thank you,
Good.
Andreas, for accepting to stay with us this morning. We know you're very busy, mainly because I think you're probably one of the people in the world that knows more about education. So my first question is, are you optimistic about the future?
I do believe that education is our hope for the future. We can prepare young people for social problems we cannot yet imagine, to use technologies that have not been invented, to learn for jobs that have not been created. That is the possibility of education. Our schools today will be our society, our economy tomorrow. I do have that hope. I see even, or particularly after the pandemic, many young people going back to their teachers saying, you know, during the pandemic, it was really difficult, but I learned to learn on my own. I found amazing resources out there. Can't we do schooling differently, giving us a little bit more of a voice? And I see many teachers after the pandemic who come back and say, during the pandemic, I learned that education is not a transactional business. It's a real social enterprise. And I was always a good instructor, but now I became a great coach, a great mentor, a great facilitator, good evaluator, a good social worker, a good psychologist. Can we not define the role of teachers better? And I do think there's a lot of energy, really, that make me hopeful, despite all the problems. That's obvious.
And do you think we've learned the lesson, or it'll be like a boomerang and we'll go back to the past?
That's always a good question. Education is a very conservative social enterprise. And sometimes we as parents are part of the problem, not part of the solution. We get very anxious when our children no longer learn what was important for us, or when they start to learn things that we no longer understand. And teachers are often more likely to teach how they were taught themselves than how they learned to teach. And as a minister of education, you can lose an election when something goes wrong in education, and you never win an election because it takes time to translate good ideas into a better outcome. So yeah, education is very hard to change, very conservative. It has, survived all sorts of disasters, including wars. So there's no guarantee that we will do things differently. But once again, I can see many young people, many teachers who really learn that the education of tomorrow will need to be very different. The future will always surprise us. The pandemic has just been one instance now.
For many people, especially people who are not educators, technology has been the big experience in the pandemic. Yeah. But there are other important things we've learned, especially about the role of schools or the role of being present with teachers. What are the main lessons you think we should take from the pandemic, apart from digitalization?
Yeah, for me, the main lesson really is the nature of school as a kind of relational, a social enterprise. We've seen, for example, also in our latest survey, that the most important predictor for students' curiosity, for their empathy, for their trust, for their willingness to collaborate was the quality of the student-teacher relationship. We should perhaps pay more attention to this, not just, how many hours do you teach as a teacher, but how do you spend your time? How do you know who your students are, who they are today, who they want to become, how you can accompany them on that journey? I think that, for me, is the main lesson, really. But the technology one is also one that we should not underestimate. Technology is not a magic power, but it's an incredible amplifier and an incredible accelerator. It will amplify good ideas, good pedagogical practice, in the same way it amplifies poor practice. It can super empower a teacher. You can understand how different students learn differently. You can engage with that diversity, but can also disempower teachers when learning becomes more scripted, more, So I do think that is a very, very important lesson. The technology used to be there before the pandemic, but it has now got to the center of the education enterprise. And it is really, the social acceptance for technology is now much, much different than it was before the pandemic. So I think those two forces, the social nature of education and the empowerment through technology, I think are two really important changes.
Will we overcome the social justice and the differences that we've lived in the pandemic with a lot more, obviously with a strong evidence that some countries are behind others. We've lost learning. There's a big debate about how much learning we've lost. Will we catch up? Do you think we'll be able to actually overcome that loss?
Yeah, I think you need to look at this in a differentiated way. If you had learned how to learn as a student, if you had access to great, alternative resources, if you had parents who, with an interest, with a support in your learning, maybe, you actually flourished during this time of the pandemic. But if students used to be spoon-fed by their teachers, and that's very much true in many Spanish classrooms, where students were just, rehearsing what teachers were telling them. If you did not learn how to motivate yourself, how to set your own learning goals, monitor, have the right learning strategies, you were very badly left behind. I think that's what the pandemic has shown us. So, there is a very important learning lost. But I also think we should see the things that have been gained. A new attitude towards learning. Students having more ownership over what they learn and how they learn and when they learn and where they learn. And I do hope, we should recover the learning losses, but we should not lose those new sources of learning and agency, the co-creation of lessons, the kind of social support that teachers provide. So I think it's very important not just to rebuild what we had, but to really keep that new energy as well.
Let's go to the curriculum. I've been participating in a long study for 2 years now on different countries on how policies actually put in the curriculum all these priorities. And it seems to be a big distance of what we really know is important and the decisions we take locally to actually take out maths or Spanish and put time or set time to actually train all these new skills that we think are so important. Why is such a big difference on the desiderata of the politicians and the decisions we take in the day after day?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There is a big gap between the intentions that are easy to spell out in the curriculum and the actual implementation, how we bring that to life. And part of this is that curriculum has often been, the realm of a few experts. You have a few academics who make wonderful decisions about what millions of students should learn, but we don't very much engage those learners. We don't engage the teachers who are the designers of the learning environments to put that curriculum into practice. And that's how, the curriculum often remain words and not action. And I do believe curriculum implementation is really the challenge where we need to invest more. The question is not what new things can we add to the curriculum. The question is how can we teach fewer things in greater depths? How can we give teachers more space to deepen conceptual understanding? You need to know, things in physics and chemistry, but more importantly, can you think like a scientist? Can you design an experiment? Can you distinguish questions that are scientifically investigable from those that are not? History, it's not about names and places and more of them. No, it's about, can you think like an historian? Do you understand how the narrative of a society has emerged, how it developed, how it advanced, and sometimes how it unravels when the context changes? Those ways of thinking, this deep conceptual understanding, is what good learning is about. Of course, for a teacher, it's more comfortable to teach the surface of a curriculum. I can go through page after page of the school book and then, no, but that's not what will enable young people to master the knowledge of the future. That will educate them for our past, not for their future. So I do believe it's very important to work on the curriculum implementation. And that is really giving teachers the support, the space, and also the environment to become designers.
I think it sounds great. However, in many Spanish-speaking countries, like Spain as well, there is a social debate that puts competences, skills, soft skills, opposite to content. Families go bizarre if we make changes, and there is a social contest against innovation, thinking it's going to take down the levels. Why is it so difficult for educators to transmit society the importance of this change?
Well, I think it's a misconception to see competency and content as two opposing ends on a spectrum. They're really two sides of the same coin. Now, what is very clear, the modern world no longer rewards you just for what you know. Now, Google knows everything. The world rewards you for what you can do with what you know. Employers understand that. Actually, if you speak to those people who use the skills of people, they immediately understand. I need people who are competent, who can think creatively, who can live with themselves, who can live with different people, can engage with the planet. So I think that's not very difficult. But for parents, they often see, okay, I learned this when I was young and it's no longer in the school curriculum. So somehow we are losing things. We need to become better to communicate what competency is about. You see that, when you do your first job interview, it's not just about your scores in science and language. How you come across, can you present yourself? Can you engage in questions that you're unfamiliar with? Those things come out very quickly. And I think that's where we have to be better to communicate the idea, the concept, the value of competency, rather than see people we always see what we lose, but we need to put an effort in helping people to see what we gain.
Mm-hmm. I think in Spain we tend to see the half-empty bottle instead of the half-full. I'm not sure if it's the right expression, but there is a big row around the new law, but I know you've expressed that you think it's a positive step forwards. What do you think is actually going to help the change we all want?
Well, if you look to Spain and even more so Latin America, the school system has become a mile wide but just an inch deep. There is a lot of material being taught at very superficial depths. Why do I say this? Because that's what the PISA results show. If I look at the PISA results, the students do well on the surface. They can reproduce quite shallow content. But when they have to think on their own, when they have to think across the boundaries of subject disciplines, when they have to apply their knowledge, they have great difficulties. That's the mirror image of the curriculum. That's where the weakness of the system is. So I think to address this is really about creating greater depths in the learning experiences. And when I look at the number of student dropouts, Spain has done quite well in reducing it, but it's still high actually. Why do people drop out? It's not because they don't have the money to go to school, because they do not think that relates to their lives. This is the biggest threat to education. It's not, our inefficiency. It's the loss of relevance in a world that is rapidly changing. Many employers today say, okay, your exam is one thing, but I really care for what you can do. And so I think we need to work a lot harder to reconnect schools with the real life and the needs of our society now. We know how to educate second-class robots, people who are very good to reproduce what we told them. But what will make us human in a world of artificial intelligence, where the kind of things that are easy to teach and easy to test have become easy to digitize? These are the questions I think we need to ask. And I actually think Spain is on a good path on this. It's actually not very, 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 very quick on this. Most countries have gone that route 10 years earlier.
Let's go to teachers, who are probably, very important, obviously, characters in the scene of education. In the International Summit of Teaching Profession, it's been said that we need trust and professional autonomy. How could we combine that with accountability and a system that guarantees the quality of the teaching?
It's a good question. I actually think accountability and trust go together. You trust your mother, but will you trust her to fly a Boeing 747? That's, I think, the question. Trust is always a matter of professional competency, and professional competency requires that collaborative culture and transparency. Maybe in accountability, we should think less about vertical accountability. You talk to your school leader, and the school leader talks to the municipal. We should think more about lateral accountability. Creating more communities of teachers, where teachers, observe each other's classes, where they engage in collaborative professional development, where every day you get a mirror, how are my practice playing up? Autonomy is not about I do things the way I like to do them. Autonomy is about I do things the way I know they are right in the name of my profession. If you are a medical doctor, you do an operation and you do not do this in accordance with the latest standards of your profession, actually your patients are going to sue you. They're going to be very angry. And in education, we do not have that culture, but you are autonomous in your work. There is no government that will make a curriculum for you as a doctor. That is your job, but it's embedded in a very strong profession. And that's the part that is missing in education. We have very much atomized our school systems. Teachers work in isolation in a classroom and are, autonomous in that. But they're not, that autonomy is not embedded in the professional culture. So the accountability really needs to be strengthened on a lateral way. And then, the vertical accountability will become less important. But you will not create a better system by giving more autonomy and reducing accountability. They're both, again, two sides of the same coin.
Going on with this topic, we in our country, I think we're very worried about the challenge of leadership and obviously the governing bodies of the schools, how we structure that leadership. In Spain, we have a problem. Nobody wants to be a principal in a public school because things are getting more difficult. How would be a proper training for future leaders and future principals and the roles that actually are so important for the functioning?
Yeah, I think you need to start early. If you are a teacher in Singapore, the very first day you get into your school as a teacher, your school principal will ask you, what do you want to do in your life? Do you want to go into, expert teaching or curriculum design or, or leadership? And then from that moment on, you'll start to work on yourself. And I think we often think, okay, you are many years of a teacher and then one day you do a concourse to apply a principal. That doesn't give you good principles. You need to develop those leadership skills throughout your career. And I think it's something that we can do with a good human resource management. We should think about in schools more, rather than treating every teacher equally, to make only when you get older, you get a little bit more advanced in your career. We should think early on, where are the talents of people? How can we use them best? School should become more a diverse place of talents. There are many leadership responsibilities that teachers can take while they're teaching, but they can develop this. And then at the end, leadership becomes an interesting challenge. If you are just, an administrative leader of a building and you get a little bit more money, good people will not do that. Good people will want to be instructional leaders. They want to engage with, the people in the school and help them, to grow in their profession. And I think if you create opportunities for this, you will not have difficulties finding really good school principals.
You mentioned Singapore. Is any other experiences that you think it could inspire at this moment that we are actually discussing socially about how to design the future teaching profession, career? Where should we look at?
Well, there are many good examples. I mean, if you look for a more kind of traditional approach, the College of Leadership in England is a good example where you can actually learn how to become a leader. Some people say, well, leaders should be recruited laterally. They should not be teachers. They should be just good managers. I actually think there is value in recruiting leaders from the education profession because ultimately that is your mission as a leader, to advance education. It's not to manage a process. But I do believe you need to learn and have the talent to lead people, to lead change, and to, leadership is about encouraging and supporting people with change in difficult situations. And you can learn that. And I think there are many different avenues how we can build those skills. But once again, what I think is important to do that, while you are a teacher, not at the end of your career. Many, some of your best leaders, maybe the youngest, not the oldest, I don't know.
That's an issue here. Age seems to be the only way you progress in your career. It doesn't seem to be right.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you as well a question about the role that ethics and purpose or the spiritual side, the moral side, should take in the schools now that we are living in such a complex world as well. And there is a pressure for instrumental or STEAM or technology, but what's the role, space the school should have for training people to learn to live their own lives?
I think it's crucially important that people learn to live their own lives. We used to teach people something, but now the most important thing is, do you have that kind of compass to give you direction? to find your own direction in a world that is more and more ambiguous. You know, in the past, you could always look to the outside. You could find the truth outside. You could trust the sources of information that you read. Today, you look at Google, and Google can tell you whatever you like to hear, really, or whatever reinforces your own kind of opinion. In the past, you could always ask, you know, older people around you, more experienced people. They knew the world around you really well, and they could probably, you know, tell you the right things. Today, you know, you never know. Older people, what they tell you, is it timeless wisdom or just outdated bias? You know, the world is changing very quickly. So I think that kind of compass is very important, and that is what has ethics at its core. And people who do not have that foundation under their feet will build walls around them. That's what we see all, you know, politically, socially, culturally. When you lose that floor under your feet, that's the moment you shield yourself. You become antagonistic to others. You cannot live with people with different views and opinions and so on. So I do believe with those values and ethics. And we've always seen them, you know, at the, you know, outside of the school curriculum. We add them on. Actually, those values should be at the center of everything that we teach. It's not that we need a kind of ethics subject. No, it's actually when you learn science, you should become an ethical engineer. When you learn sports, you should learn to take responsibility of yourself, to take responsibility for others, to develop courage, leadership. And the school subjects are amazing opportunities for that.
As I think you and I are getting into that category of old people giving advice, I'd like to finish asking you to give some advice to teachers and teachers-to-be, who are the main readers of our journal.
Yeah, you know, I think as a teacher, if you really have that mission to change and to contribute to the lives of young people, I think you will be a happy teacher. I really think it's that space, that agency, that you can actually contribute to the future, understand who your students are, who they want to become, what you can contribute. It's not about just giving students more choice of what they learn. It's helping them to find out, what are you really, really good at? Or what can you become good at? And then what serves a social purpose? You know, if your students find a social purpose in what they do, you know, you have contributed to a better world as a teacher. I really believe that the teachers today are the designers of our future. They are the engineers that build the future that, you know, we will see.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Gracias.